Hello, friends. It's that time of the month again. Can't believe it's come around so quick. That long expanse of not doing whiskey me tastings that sits between, well, the latter part of the month and the earlier part of the next month. Finally, it's over. We're here once again to enjoy a dram together live through your Facebook and through YouTube. And this month, we are tasting Glenkinchie Distillers Edition. And to join me on the wonderful journey through this dram, to experience it with us, is Joe Last. Hello, Joe.
Hello. What a wonderful introduction.
Thank you. I think I actually hammed it up a bit too much this week. It was almost like an American chat show host territory.
I quite enjoyed it, actually.
Well, you're a guest worthy of such a hammy, enthusiastic introduction, I think.
Thank you. No pressure to live up to that introduction then.
you're going to
Set
do
me up
fine.
failure straight away.
So we're going to taste this whiskey and talk about Glenkinchie, but first of all, give us a little introduction about yourself, what you do. You are the luxury malts ambassador for Reserve Brands. What does that mean?
So, yeah, I mean, I started with Diageo about a year ago. I actually spent about 10 years working behind bars. Then I hot-footed it over to the other side after working in a couple of bars that had a strong whiskey focus. Luxury whiskey ambassador. I mean, I've always just worked cross portfolio with all of our whiskies. We have quite a fair few. So this role just kind of like morphing into welcoming some more whiskies that I can talk about, including Distillers Editions, working a bit more maybe on Mortlach, some of our Singleton range, 21, 25-year-old, all the way up and down the portfolio. So it's just more things to talk about.
Diageo have more distilleries in Scotland than anyone else, so there's already a lot of whiskies there. But then to be sort of working with the cream of that crop, if you like, is an enviable role, I would say. And I reckon, well, everyone who's watching this right now might well be slightly jealous of your day-to-day job.
Yeah, I mean, I can't complain. I will say that much.
Indeed. Have you? I mean, it's not fair to ask a parent if they have a favourite sibling, but do you have a sort of couple of favourite whiskies that you go to? I mean, I know it's a sort of slightly lame question because, of course, it's occasion dependent and where you are and who you're with. But which one sort of calls to you, most?
It's actually funny because yesterday, a couple of days ago, we were doing some filming at Milroy's for the whiskey show, and we did a brand ambassador's choice session. And every single time I always talk about Lagavulin and Lagavulin 16. So if any of the ambassadors are going to watching this, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, she's talking about it again. At every available opportunity, it's Lagavulin 16. If that ambassador role existed, I would happily take it. It was the first whiskey that I actually tried, Scotch whiskey that I actually tried. So quite maybe a weighty conversion Scotch, but I always go back to it.
That's definitely going into the deep end, isn't it?
Exactly. Just went straight in there.
Literally everything you've tried since then has been really kind of light and a bit insipid, right?
Imagine me going with them, all of our whiskies being like something really light and floral, and everyone's like, Joe, no, it's not. But my palate's just been completely masked by Lagavulin. But yeah, I love Clynelish, love the texture, love like juicy,
it's one of my favorites as well.
Waxy kind of whiskies, anything with a really good texture that just gets those like taste buds going, are some of my all-time favorites. And then so I mean, I've got a lot to work with, so I'm sure we can drop a few favorites on as we go along.
Yeah, totally.
And you? What about you?
Oh well,
you don't have to be biased.
I wasn't expecting to be asked that question. Well, I must say Clynelish is definitely one of my favorites of the Diageo stable. I think it's fantastic whiskey. But to sort of undermine my own question, it really is use case dependent, isn't it? There are certainly times, especially in the winter mostly, where a Lagavulin seems more appropriate for sure. And I think that's the beauty of malts, really, is that each of them have their own application, and that application is individual to the user as well. And it's just about exploring them and finding out what the best use is. Some of them mix really, really well, and there's other ones that I wouldn't really turn to as mixing spirits. So that's the fun of it for me.
Yeah. I think there's just so many, aren't there, that there should be, well, hopefully a whiskey for everyone. So if I remember doing like tastings and someone doesn't like the whiskey we're trying that day, I'm always like, right, we'll just try something completely different. Eventually, it might take a few years. If you try them all, there should be one in some way that you're going to enjoy. I'm impartial to. I worked with Singleton for quite a bit, and the 12-year-old works really well, the cucumber tonic, which people were quite surprised about. But yeah, it's really fresh, and that kind of replaces that summer gin and tonic. So yeah, it really kind of slots in loads of different ways, mixing, non-mixing.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I've mixed Singleton with like apple juice and soda and things like that before, and it works really, really well. Those sort of like fresh, green, springing time kind of flavors are good with Singleton. Yeah.
Glenkinchie's kind of sits in that kind of, I don't know, fresh, floral, lighter style, I think, of malt.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more honey. For me, in Glenkinchie, then Singleton's more like orchardy fruits, but yeah, they kind of sit in a similar kind of camp, even though, you know, different locations, etc. But yeah.
Well, Lagavulin was the first whiskey you tried, single malt. I know, because we just discussed this, that Glenkinchie was the first distillery you visited, or single malt distillery.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was the first single malt distillery I visited as well.
Such a small.
The revelations just keep coming tonight.
It's like we actually practiced this 15 minutes ago before we went live.
I know. No one would ever believe that we did 10 rehearsals of this.
Too rubbish for that.
It does seem so unprepared. Well, but Glenkinchie is a good first distillery to visit, of course, because of its location near Edinburgh. It's like 20 minutes, half an hour, depends on traffic.
Yeah, it's like 15 miles out of Edinburgh. So yeah, it's amazing. And at the moment, there's you can get a shuttle bus from Edinburgh straight down to Glenkinchie. So it's really, really easy to just pop over if you're staying in Edinburgh, which is what I did a few weeks ago.
Who organises the shuttle bus? Is that something that's put on by the distillery, or is it an independent bus?
I'm not sure, actually. I think possibly both. I think it might be part of just the central tourism, and then we have, you know, Destination Scotland, or, you know, that we organise tours, etc. through. So it probably would be a bit of both, really. And I think now, from obviously the dreaded situation that I don't like talking about, but now all the tours are kind of starting to ramp up, and the bus is starting to fill. So that's really nice. Really nice to see.
And good reason to go there, because it's just undergone a pretty significant refurbishment, hasn't it? I've been there actually a few times, but I was last there, I guess about 3 years ago, and it was a bit of a building site, really. Although the sort of production side of the distillery was still intact and still churning out whiskey, everything else was kind of scaffolding and being dug up and diggers and all sorts of things, which was actually slightly disappointing to me, because one of the sort of features of that distillery that everyone used to kind of talk about when we went there, and actually I remember Glenkinchie putting on events there, was they had a sort of lawn bowls thing out the front of the distillery, and they used to bring bartenders over from Edinburgh and further afield to play bowls, and then obviously drink some whiskey. And we were like, no, they're ripping it all up. But of course it was all part of this big plan, because there's now like an all singing, all dancing visitors centre, right? Which I haven't seen yet, but you're obviously familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean that sounds really good. I haven't actually never got a chance to go and play. It'd probably be pretty dreadful. The only ball-based sport that I play is tennis, and I can't imagine that going very well. But yeah, it's just gone through a massive kind of refurb, and the front lawn at the moment is actually stunning. They've done like a curated garden space, you know, garden home, Edinburgh Malton, for example. In this garden, they've planted loads of plants, and that are kind of seasonal, that are going to be kind of flourishing and blooming all year round. So when I went, it was a similar day to what it was today. So it was like perfect day to taste and talk about Glenkinchie, because it was absolutely beaming sunshine. I think, I don't know if this fact is right or myth, is that this is the area that gets the most sunshine in Scotland, but I'm not sure if that's fact or
not saying much though, is it?
No, not really. But one or 2 days. So if you are going on holiday, this is where you want to go.
Well, East Lothian, I think East Lothian is like one of the main, or traditionally one of the main sort of barley growing regions in Scotland as well, which probably is on account of the sunshine, as you say. So in a way, if you sort of want to go to like a region that supports the whiskey industry and is, you know, almost the most apt home for a distillery, then East Lothian is probably one of the best to pick. Yeah.
I was actually looking on Google Maps because I'm actually planning my next distillery tour, which is on the west coast, because I only got up to Space so I'm going down. And I just looked over at Glenkinchie, and if you look over on the top, it's just patchwork full of farmland, just loads of different colours. Imagine just a complete shirt full of patchwork. That's what it looks like from ahead. But back to the garden, it's just absolutely stunning. So in the refurb, we also put in 3 bees nests. So we've got about 65,000 bees in the front area, and you know, you have the water still running on the left hand side. So it's very picturesque. Walking up to what now stands a gentleman called Johnny Walker with a very famous dog. And so it's a beautiful change, and I'm not sure you can play bowls. I don't think they'd be happy.
I think they've
thrown balls into the plants.
Probably too many drunk bartenders abusing the game on the lawn. They were like, you know what, we need to plan millions of pounds into a refurbishment of a visitor centre just to stop these bartenders visiting and chucking balls around the place.
Well, there's a few seats now. Very civil.
So perhaps you could describe a little bit about the kind of flavour of Glenkinchie, maybe a little bit about the sort of working part of the distillery itself, and how we get that flavour from that distillery. What sort of defines it?
Yeah, so I think Glenkinchie for me, you know, the 12-year-old, if you've tried it, I mean, today we're going to be trying the Distillers Edition, but the 12-year-old, if you try it, actually on the tour now we have a sensory room, which breaks things down into aroma. And they kind of break things, don't want to ruin it for any visitors, but they break things down into four kind of elements of smell, and you're supposed to try and pick those out. And so I'm not going to be able to tell you what they are, because otherwise I will ruin it. So there'll be loads of tour guides that'll be really upset with me.
Oh, so it's like a blind test.
Yeah, so they spray on when you're in a perfume. Marie, they spray on there, and you're supposed to smell it, and they tell you the story of Glenkinchie in this sensory room. So it's absolutely stunning. But for me, Glenkinchie's heather, honey, quite citrusy, apple, kind of hints of pears, but that's kind of more reserved for Cardew for me. But also today, I was saying earlier, you know, I've gone back to the 12-year-old. I tried it at the distillery, and it was really buttery, Werther's original, and today it's really citrusy and zesty. So this kind of, the flavor just completely changes for every whiskey, so it's kind of difficult to describe. But
yeah, and worth just emphasizing, it's not the whiskey that's changing, it's your perception of the flavor of that whiskey that's changing based on where you are, exactly. Who you're with, whether you're stressed, or whether you're cold, or whether you're whether you've just drank a pint of Guinness, or in actual fact you've been on a water fast all day long. All of these factors play into it so much, which is why we have to be careful with, tasting notes on pouches and things like that, because, at any given moment, you're going to find all of these or none of these. And,
exactly.
And that's the interesting
thing about it. It's such a personal thing, flavour, when you're talking about it. So what I get is definitely not what the next person gets. And obviously I've proved myself right there that I even taste different things in this whiskey in different times. But Glenkinchie is amazing. I think the other day you were doing a session with Ali with Oban, wasn't it?
Yeah, Oban. Yeah, we did.
And you shared a picture of the still house, and it was very. You were like, I'm not really sure what to say. It's very grey. We don't know what to say about it. And Glenkinchie, on the other hand, when you walk into that still room, I think it's just like sunshine. It's like those stills are so obviously one of the largest in Scotland, if not the largest, and they just kind of beam. It's like a Scottish holiday whenever you walk into a still house. But with the refurb, they've painted, the walls kind of like a bright yellow orange color. So going into that room, those stills are just like a ray of sunshine. And whenever I kind of look at a bottle of Glenkinchie, I kind of am reminded of those stills. But when you look at like the production, I guess, of Glenkinchie, you'd think that, it's going to be the new maker, for example, is going to be really light. But actually, because of the line arms that go down, it's not really as kind of light and floral as it could be. So it's really the maturation, I guess, of now minimum 12 years, but it used to be 10 years. That kind of rounds it out and gives you that kind of like, well, for me, I kind of get hints of like nuttiness and fruitiness and whatnot with Glenkinchie.
It's one of those distilleries where like the setup, without getting too technical, is sort of contradictory, right?
Yeah.
You've got certain parts of it that are conducive to making quite light whiskey, and then other parts that are conducive to making heavy whiskey, like the worm tubs, for example. There's worm tubs, isn't it? And so you mix that together, and like worm tubs make sort of sulphurous, meaty whiskey. Big copper stills make light, delicate floral whiskey. Put it together, what do you get? Well, you get something in the middle with a bit of both, and that's the fascinating thing about it. Yeah, huge stills. I mean, you'd struggle for that still house to not be light and bright with that much reflective metal in the room with you. It's so hot in that still house.
They must polish it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I've never seen like shinier stills. That might be part of like the routine now with the refurb that they
I bet you're right. I bet you the cleaning program was doubled after the refurb. They're like, these things gotta be damn shiny from now on.
Use some sunglasses when you walk in. But yeah, you know, it's a really amazing room to be in. And then really, really nice kind of. We were up at Dalwhinnie as well during this kind of tour, and it's just completely different.
Yeah.
You know, Dalwhinnie is still quite traditional, and the room's actually kind of similar to Glenkinchie, but it's a lot more. I say bright. I think every time I think of Glenkinchie, just as a distillery, is bright and friendly and you know, just sunshine in a bottle and in the process as well. But yeah, and then also there's an amazing. I'm obsessed with miniature things. And there is a model.
So how come you've got the full bottle and I've got the pouch then?
So I actually have a little mini, because I have a mini of nearly everything, but this is a 12.
I'd say that's a midi. That's not a mini.
Yeah, no, I couldn't find a tiny one, but if you move it further away.
There you go. Now we're talking.
But on the tour, you get to see like a replica model of a distillery it was actually a replica of, I think, 18, 19, 20, something like that. Dates, which is amazing.
Very cool, that thing. It's so
cool. Good, isn't it? Yeah. And you get to see. So it obviously still has all the malting floors and that part of the process in it. But one of the most interesting parts of the distillery.
That was my first question when I knew they were doing the refurb. I was like, do not rip out the model distillery. So, like, if for any, if you've not been there, then you should go. But imagine, like, it's sort of like a toy train set of distilleries with the various stages of production set out. I mean, it's a room-sized model. It's massive.
Yeah.
And you get to it's a really great way actually of understanding how whiskey's made, because you get to see it all this sort of bird's eye view.
All in one room, yeah.
Yeah. Because often when you're trailing around distilleries, you're like, okay, cool. So they do fermentation here and this is the distillation, but there's so many pipes and doorways and sort of passages that it can be quite difficult to kind of picture it as a whole thing. So that model distillery, and there's nothing else like it in any other distillery in Scotland, I don't think.
No, not that I know of. I asked whether it would ever actually been in action, and there's ums and ahs whether it actually did or not, because that would have been amazing.
Well, it would be the smallest distillery in Scotland, wouldn't it? Yeah.
I know. The spirit take was about the size of my hand, so I can't imagine how much would come out.
Although, you know what, I can think of a few American whiskey producers who are filling barrels that are probably even smaller than those, to be honest with you. Such is the trend for American tiny little barrels in American whiskey. Yeah. Anyway, so do you want to talk just a little bit more, because this is the Distillers Edition. We mentioned the 12-year-old. It's pretty obvious what's in that bottle. So what makes this one different?
So the Distillers Edition, so Glenkinchie originally is part of the classic malt range, and then some years later we did the Distillers Edition. So all of most of the classic malts. It's the second maturation in kind of wine or sherry cask. So they're seasoned casks. Obviously, over the years, sherry casks have become very much more rare and difficult to get hold of. So, and so the Glenkinchie, expensive. They've realised that they really need them. So Glenkinchie has been finished in Amontillado, seasoned cask, and for example, comparatively to the 12-year-old, I don't know if you can see. I mean, it doesn't mini and large, but the colours are quite different.
Even accounting for a thicker bottle, that is a difference in color. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you know, it's still at 43%, so same as the 12-year-old. And yeah, it's delicious. For me, this one is just a bit more weighty on the nose. So if anyone hasn't poured their pouch yet, because we have been waffling on for a while, now would be the time.
Don't worry, Joe, they're used to it. This is what they get every month. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to pour a little. For me, the nose is just a lot more weighty. It's a bit thicker. I don't know if you can smell texture through a glass, but if you compare and contrast, I can.
Things associated with thickness. Yeah.
Yeah, that smell of thickness. Well done. Someone's actually held on through the talking, so they're probably really happy that we're actually smelling whiskey. So for me, it's actually a bit more nutty. It's thicker. It smells creamier. I pick up a lot of honey in the Distillers Edition, and then quite often when I'm talking about other whiskies, and this is again back to the power of suggestion and what you pick up often, is quite chocolatey. So, you know, on that note, again, it's something that a lot of people say they pick up coffee in, not this whiskey, but other whiskies that I talk about, and I don't drink coffee, so I never ever get it. So flavors.
How do you deal with the mornings? How does that work?
Not very well. That's why we're doing it at 8 p.m. But yeah, I don't ever drink coffee, so I can never pick those up. So on the nose, for me, that's what I get. But you might get something completely different. But it's very filling on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that sherry casks can be amazing. You know, whether it's full-term sherry cask or used as a finishing device, but it's very easy to overpower a whiskey with a sherry cask, and I think a special care and attention needs to be taken to whiskies like Glenkinchie, which are relatively light on the spectrum of styles, sort of conform to that lowland style, really, of lighter styles of whiskey. You could just easily destroy this whiskey with a sherry cask in a matter of months, weeks even, possibly. So for me, I think the success of this whiskey is that careful implementation of sherry cask that complements the distillery characteristic, but it you know is there, it's present, it's not sort of pointless.
Yeah, I think as well, like you still get the grasp on the finish. Get. I mean, I've just skipped through the tasting, but I'm assuming.
No, sorry, I just screwed it up for you.
It's okay. Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, we're not going to taste it.
Just taste it now, guys. All right, just taste. Go.
Taste
you have our permission.
But on the finish, I'm going to skip to the finish. It's still got that grassy kind of element that's you know, synonymous with Glenkinchie, and that kind of slightly drying spice and is on the finish, and a bit of heat as well. Quite often people think that comes along with like a higher ABV, but obviously this is exactly the same to the core range, so it's amazing. Yeah, bananas. It's funny that you say bananas there on the nose, because walking through the tun room in Glenkinchie smells like banana bread. It's amazing. You just kind of walk along and you get stages of banana. Quite as same as Cardu, really. Maybe I don't know if all those rooms smell like banana bread. I'll have to do the same test.
Yeah, I think it depends. I do think they differ, but it's often fruity, because sometimes you know, you get appley smells, don't you, or orchard fruits and things like that. Sometimes it smells more biscuity, and give me a whole mixture. Let's see what I'm going to put up some other tasting notes. Here and there, I can pick up chocolate, and here
an apple as well.
Yeah. So Samantha followed the food pairing recommendation on the tasting card. Glad someone's doing it. Thank you.
I was actually going to go out and buy some vanilla ice cream, but I didn't have time, because I'm a massive fan of. I don't know if you haven't. Speaking of not drinking coffee, affogatos, where you pour coffee over ice cream. I just pour whiskey over different ice creams, and I can imagine this actually working really well with vanilla. I think, what was it? Singleton works really well with a hazelnut ice cream, getting really, really good. And those kind of like bring it into the desserts in the summer months. And yeah, really recommend trying it, especially maybe those that still like their dram neat. It's like combining all your desserts in one, which highly recommend.
Lovely.
Yeah, or cheese.
This is actually my cheese. There you go. This is my
There you go.
father-in-law Rod.
Hi.
Is trying it with Manchego. He's our correspondent in Spain.
Amazing. Hello.
He's not actually in Spain.
Oh, is it not? I mean, I believe anything.
What else have we got here? Vanilla apple reminds me of the Manickmore from a couple of years ago. And you know what? That's a fair summary. I'd say Glenkinchie and Manickmore do have some similarities in the distillery style.
Unfortunately, they haven't made Manickmore as pretty as Glenkinchie.
Yeah.
We'll hold out.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, really enjoyable dram actually. I'm got a couple of the Distillers Editions, and as I mentioned, like Lagavulin all the time.
Yeah.
So Pedro Jimenez for that Lagavulin sticky, you know, sweet dessert drams, and I think Distillers Editions in general really make a great dessert dram.
Yeah, for sure. Right. If anyone's got any questions, I've got one here I'm going to pop up. Then now's the time to do it because we have maybe 5 minutes left. Maybe 15 if the questions are good and Joe's chat can survive that long. What do we got here? Last bottle I bought, drunk, was the Distillers Edition 1999. Is there a difference between each year and are there better years than others?
I haven't had the chance to try through the years that many. I think actually at the moment I'm trying the bottled in 2008, bottled in 2020 rather, whereas you have the one that's distilled in 2007. I wouldn't imagine that it's too different if we think obviously about the 12-year-old has been made over many, many years and it is a consistent product. So I would say that I would try different ones because, you know, the environment of when you age whiskey, you know, the timing, you know, it's all the same product, but the world is, you know, environmental factors do change.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't ever say yes or no, but I'd always be keen to try them through the ages and do a compare and contrast. That doesn't really help. Help much for that question, but I do think you know you're going to try more whiskies and more expressions, the funner it is. So yeah, highly recommend.
Totally. I mean, I would add to that. First of all, it can be tricky to like be able to do a comparative tasting between those different vintages. Maybe at the distillery they've got bottles like that, or one of Diageo's other distilleries. But even then, like, you know, you're probably going to get more deviation of the actual individual dram just based on like, is the bottle half full? How long has it been open?
Yeah.
Because those factors do affect it over time, especially. So you really need to start with new or very nearly new bottles
all in
of
the
all
same
of them.
Kind of situation as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Like you were mentioning earlier, you know, at the distillery I tasted the 12-year-old and it was, you know, I had a different experience. So, I mean, the more whiskey, the better. So. That's good. If someone has asked, will we be doing a PX edition?
Just getting that one up. PX edition Glenkinchie.
Yeah, I mean, I think PX might be a bit too strong for Glenkinchie. That's probably why we used it for Lagavulin. But then it's always about the time, and you know we have amazing people that work in our amazing blenders and in the team, and they are absolute wizards with cask management. There's a lot of experimentation going on around in all of our whiskies at the moment. We've just done, I think, a few. I know I talk about Singleton a lot, but with the 21-year-old and the 25-year-old, it's like Trinity cask harmony releases that have been aged in two different and then married and finished in different casks. So, I mean, I wouldn't never say never, but unfortunately, that's way above my my jurisdiction. So,
yeah, I mean, these distillers editions are pretty well established now, aren't they? In terms of they've never changed, to my knowledge, in terms of the chosen finishing cask.
The finish is always the same, and realistically, this kind of started. I think it was only 10 years after the classic malt.
Yeah,
probably in just 98, maybe.
That sounds about right to me. Yeah,
about 98, and they've kind of obviously there's been different releases, different years. For transparency, we put it on the bottle, but yeah, I don't know if it's changed. So PX is Pedro Jimenez, so type of sherry. So it's what kind of the finishing
Yeah, it's a particularly
like
sweet type of sherry.
yeah.
It tastes like raisins and sultanas and
Yeah.
Christmas, basically, but it's thick
Christmas.
and heavy and sweet.
Thick and
Yeah.
heavy. Yeah. When we talk about, I guess when we talk about sherry house, it's I guess when we talk about maturation and aging in whiskey, there are two different types. I guess ex-bourbon and then ex-sherry or ex-European, because as we mentioned earlier, sherry casks are becoming a bit more difficult to get your hands on.
Yeah.
But yeah, very, very important part of whiskey's history, I think, sherry.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different session.
Yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole with
Yeah,
that.
let's not go down that rabbit
We've
hole.
kind of come to a neat half an hour. There's one more question for you. How do I get your job, Joe? And I have the same question.
Okay. So next week I'm going to do how to get my job session. But yeah, I'm very lucky to be working with such a large portfolio of whiskies. And if anyone ever has any questions and wants to try more, you can annoy Tristan, and he can get in touch with me, and hopefully we can get you some more samples out.
You're on Instagram, Twitter?
I am indeed, yeah. So I did create this when I was a younger bartender, so please don't judge me. It's at Liquid Libation. I really wished that I just did Joe last, because it's a lot easier to write. But so if any of you do find me, there's a reward of whiskey there.
Yeah. Oh, that does sound good, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does.
Great. Look, Joe, thanks so much for
My
coming
pleasure.
on. Great to have you. Please come back again,
Yeah, will
because
do.
as mentioned, there are lots of different Diageo distilleries and whiskies, and many of them delicious. We featured a lot already, of course, but there is still more to come.
Yeah.
We are
We can work
working our way
through.
Yeah, we're working our way through your ambassador team, but we've obviously got our favorites, and you're one of them, I think. So
Thanks. I mean, I bet you tell that to every ambassador, but we do talk to each other. So if you have, we will.
Damn, that's the flaw. That's the flaw in the plan.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Been great to see you. And for our adventure subscribers, so those of you who subscribe to Single Malt Scotch and World Whiskey, we will be doing the World Whiskey tasting next week on the 23rd, Lakes Distillery. So make sure you tune into that one. And if we don't see you then we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye.